Hello and welcome to DIF 2017. My name is Mara DeFilippis and we're coming to you from Arizona State University in Tempe, Arizona. ASU is a pioneer university with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and we have a unique partnership with the City of Phoenix, making up the first university municipality partnership within the CE 100. Today we'll begin sharing with you a bit more about our partnership with the City of Phoenix and how we've engaged another institute here at ASU to better understand the economic impacts of moving toward a regional circular economy here in the local area, Phoenix area, and across Maricopa County, which is the most populous county here in the state of Arizona. So I'd first like to start with some introductions. As I mentioned, I'm Mara DeFilippis, and I'm the Project Engagement Manager for the Global Sustainability Solution Services, a program within the Rob and Melani Walton Sustainability Solutions initiatives here at ASU. We are the group that directly manages the Resource Innovation and Solutions Network, or RISN for short. Our partnership with the City of Phoenix to assist them in reaching their zero waste goals and to help share best practices and solutions at a global scale. With me here today is Brandy Barrett, the Deputy Director of the Public Works Department at the City of Phoenix. Brandy is our primary liaison counterpart for RISN activities and our partner in positioning RISN and our mutual circular economy interests across the US and around the world. Also here today is Dr. Anthony Evans. He goes by Ant typically, a senior researcher for the Seidman Research Institute within the ASU W.P. Carey School of Business. Dr. Evans oversaw the research that we'll discuss today. So to kick things off, I'm going to hand it over to Brandy to give you some context and background of the City of Phoenix and the RISN program.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that very gracious introduction, Mara. We couldn't be more delighted to be here today and to have such an amazing partnership with Arizona State University and the Walton Sustainability Solutions initiatives. So a little bit about the City of Phoenix. We're the 5th most populous city in the United States, and back when we started our journey to improve sustainability and diversion in 2012-2013, we were only diverting about 16% of the solid waste that comes through the city's system from the landfill. And our elected officials, they knew that that just wasn't going to cut it, and they challenged us and they said, we really want you to improve diversion, drive to improve it to 40% by the year 2020, and recently has expanded that goal to be zero waste by the year 2050. We are very pleased to announce that we are now at a 30% diversion rate, but we know we have a lot of ground to cover still to get to our 2040 goal, as well as our zero waste goal by 2050. Reimagine Phoenix, we implemented that initiative to help us achieve these very aggressive goals, and it's really based on 3 prongs: new and improved solid waste programs, improved outreach and education with our community, and the prong that we're really going to focus on today is public-private partnerships. As a city, we know we can't achieve these goals alone, and so we engaged some key partners in the community, a couple of which I'd like to talk about. Firstly, the City of Phoenix is very well known for operating an efficient solid waste service. We do an amazing job at collecting solid waste and recyclables curbside, and we run a very efficient operation. But we knew that in order to achieve these goals, we were going to have to change how we look at waste, and we had to view it as a resource, and we knew that we were going to have to be able to create economic activity from that waste. And not being the experts, we knew we would have to partner with our Community and Economic Development Department to really help us reach out to the manufacturing community with information about what's in our waste stream to see what are the possibilities. And so they're one of our key partners. Another foundational partnership that we have is with Arizona State University, with whom we have an IGA for the Resource Innovation and Solutions Network. And RISN was really designed to help us address on a global basis and many communities waste challenges. And so one of our key things that we're working on as part of this Partnership for Circular Economy is applied projects. So each year, the Resource Innovation and Solutions Network, or RISN, conducts several projects for the city. And these projects are really designed to help us overcome obstacles that we encounter when trying to create a circular economy. And what you're seeing now on the screen is two examples. One is compost study. So we are partnering with ASU to really look at the scientific impacts of applying compost to our parks turf areas rather than the traditional chemical fertilizers. And so that we're in the second year, actually starting now the third year of a multi-year study to look at what those impacts are, and hopefully create and then market and new partnerships around compost that we are producing at our Resource Innovation Campus. Yes. The other one that you see on your screen is recycled asphalt pavement. And again, really drawing upon that scientific and engineering background that's in the depth available at Arizona State University to help us as a city break down barriers and look at what are the possibilities and really run some tests and see, how can we use these reclaimed and recycled materials that often go to the landfill. Another important initiative that we are working on with RISN and in partnership with RISN is the incubator that was recently kicked off just this summer and actually early fall. And it's a collaborative business incubator that's really designed to advance circular economy, and it's focused to support ventures that are aiming to close the loop on solid waste. ASU has a very robust entrepreneurship and innovation wing, and we really are relying a lot on that expertise to help these emerging companies that will be taking items that today can't be diverted, but developing technologies to be able to divert them in the future and generate economic activity. Our third way that we engage public-private partnerships is out at our Resource Innovation Campus. And the Resource Innovation Campus is our circular economy hub here in Phoenix. And what we're looking to do is we have 50 acres of vacant, underutilized city land that's adjacent to a closed city landfill, one of our 2 transfer stations that we operate, and a materials recovery facility, as well as our new state-of-the-art industrial size compost facility. And we're looking to attract manufacturers to come and lease space lease land from us at very attractive rates and take items straight out of our waste stream with the feedstock on site and repurpose them and remanufacture them into new products. The area outlined in red that you're seeing, those are the areas identified at the Resource Innovation Campus for those leases. So in order to achieve our goals, we knew we were going to have to get smart about what was in our waste stream, and that we would have to change how we view waste and see it as a resource, and really look to define what the economic impacts are and be able to make those arguments for advancing this work. And that's really one of the driving reasons why the city and RISN, through our partnership, commissioned the Seidman Institute to conduct these economic impact studies and really help us dial in on that.
I think the circular economy is quite a compelling case to do it, but in reality it's aspirational. What we really needed to do here was to look at what the economics are behind it. The way in which we approached it was we asked 2 specific questions. First of all, we wanted to look at what the current impact of recycling, reuse and repair activities were on the local economy. And then looking to the future, we want to look at the potential circular economy opportunities that may exist locally here within the city of Phoenix. With our first study, our focus was very much on Maricopa County rather than the city of Phoenix. For those of you who are not aware with the geography of this area, Metro Phoenix and Maricopa County are virtually one and the same in terms of area. We also felt that it was important to do this because of the nature of the data that existed. So what we were looking at here was focus on recycling, reuse and repair and maintenance. We were unable to look at repurposing and refurbishing as the data certainly didn't exist in those areas. And our study for this was 2014. So we're looking at firms that collected the feedstock or material, firms that processed the feedstock or material, and those that reused, repaired, or used in recycled material. There have been a number of studies in this area. throughout the US. There's been one on the northeastern seaboard, there's been one in Austin, Texas, there's been one in Colorado. And what we did was we looked back through those studies, we identified NAICS codes. Those are the 2, 3, 4, or 6-digit codes that you have for different industries within the US. And then applying those with county business patterns data for Maricopa County, we were able to estimate the economic impact of the recycling, the reuse and repair activities. We used a commercial model. The model that we used here was InPlan, which gives you a snapshot, a one-time, one-year snapshot of results. And our results are gross. The reason why they're gross, quite simply, is because what we're talking about here with NAICS codes is they're not very well defined. They will talk generally about the plastic industry rather than those members of the plastic manufacturers that use recycled components and those that use prime plastic. The economic impact method looks not only at the direct impact, which is obviously your employees, your suppliers, your taxes, but we're also looking at two other areas. We're looking at the indirect effects and the induced effects. The indirect effects are when a company, say a plastic recycler, puts its own demands on other suppliers, and then they get passed further upstream. The induced effect is when the employers of that plastic recycler or the employers of the suppliers go and spend their money within the local economy. So the economic impact that we're looking at today is the total impact, not purely the direct effects. Measuring this for 2014, we estimate that within the recycle, the reuse, and the repair industry, that between them, they could have had a maximum gross impact of $1.9 billion gross state product. Sounds a very large number. We'll put that into context pretty soon. We also believe that around that time, there would be 35,000 people working within the area. It would generate around 1.2 billion in labor income, and in purely state and local government taxes, we're talking of around $158.5 million. Bear in mind, again, as I say, this is maximum, because we have got people included within these numbers who probably are not dealing with recycled materials and feedstocks. If you want to break it down by the three key areas, you can see that recycling and reuse contribute about the same amount to gross state product. Having said that, reuse has a far bigger job footprint than the recycling area. Simple reason for that is with reuse, why the GSP is similar, is that we're talking about shops and things of that nature. It's retail activity. So therefore, the actual monetary contribution to the economy is not as great as the job impact. So I say $1.9 billion gross state product. What exactly does that mean? Well, in 2014, that equated to almost 1% of Arizona's GSP. Not particularly big, not particularly high. But, you know, I mean, we have to start from somewhere. And this is why we're really looking at the economics of the case for recycling. It accounted, we think, for a maximum of 2% of salaried jobs, 1.4% of labor income, and around 2.6% of state and local tax revenues. So the impacts were at that time small, but they're nonetheless significant. That was a snapshot of where we were at in 2014. I believe that the recycled waste diversion component then was around 20% in the city of Phoenix. It would be obviously slightly higher perhaps if you take into account other areas. If you look at potential opportunities looking forward, what we're looking at here was we wanted to focus very much on single-family municipal waste. We wanted to look at the waste that was actually collected from the curbside, from people's homes. Specifically looking at paper, plastics, glass, and metals. We had to reduce the scope of what we were really looking at here, because quite frankly, the area is so big, so vast, that we felt that focusing purely on single family would be a sensible move. And what that does mean is the numbers we're talking about now, we're actually ignoring the multi-family or multi-family municipal waste here, which probably accounts for around 35–40% of homes within the city of Phoenix. We're also not taking into account industrial waste or necessarily commercial waste. So I think, you know, the potential opportunities, we've narrowed it down quite specifically to single family, but it's still of interest. We're looking over a 5.5-year time period, 2017 to 2022. The first 6 months are for the capital expenditure and the setup. the following 5 years, then are more looking at the operational side of things. So how do we go about this particular study? We started off with a 2014 waste characterization study that the City of Phoenix had the foresight to actually introduce. This was undertaken by Cascadia, who went through various samples of people's waste at the MRFs and at the transfer facilities to work out exactly what exactly is in that in people's waste. We then also interviewed 20 stakeholders, predominantly local, but with some national perspectives as well. And what we were trying to look at here is the extent to which either the currently recovered feedstock or the additionally recoverable feedstock within the single family municipal waste stream could be of value to local manufacturers within the area. We were able to speak to some people that operated these feedstock processes in other parts of the US to understand their capital and operational costs. And then we used a slightly different model. It's a second model, also commonly used in the US, called REMI, which is far better looking forward to the future to consider what the impacts could be dynamically within the local economy. So back in 2014, these are the numbers that we came up with from the waste characterization study. You can see the different types in the first column, the amount that was recycled in tons in the second column, around 102,000 tons of material was recycled back in 2014. The amount that was still ending up going to waste, predominantly landfill, 390,000 tons at that time. So you can see it was around 20% back in 2014. To put that into perspective, you can compare it with New York City and Austin, who also undertook waste characterization studies at that time. You can see the City of Phoenix was lagging behind, 21%. It was good, but not as good as New York City or Austin at 33%. In actual fact, if you looked at California for the same time frame, you're looking at up to 50% of their waste was recycled or diverted. Through our series of interviews, we spoke to people, as I say, in plastics, glass, paper, and metals. We discovered that our local MRFs here in the City of Phoenix only separate PET and HDPE. The other 5 types of plastic are simply bundled together and sent on to anyone else who will take it from them, or landfilled. The PET and HDPE, although it was collected here, was still shipped worldwide, predominantly to the Far East. However, it was quite apparent from the numbers that the City of Phoenix actually collects sufficient PET to justify the establishment of a PET flake or pellet processor here within the valley, similar to OPET, which had been set up in Oregon quite recently. In terms of glass, the City of Phoenix already has a glass processor, when the market leader, in fact, in the US, Strategic Materials, were capable of handling all of our glass waste. However, they pointed out that from a waste management perspective, it's often cheaper to landfill, and their customers were predominantly Texas and Mexico, even though around 85–90% of the material was sourced locally. For metals, the City of Phoenix has quite a strong metal brokering dealerships and even 2 shredders here within the valley. They have got spare processing capacity. They're not working to capacity at present. The key problem for the 2 shredders that we spoke to, that they currently sell some of their shredded material onto 2 steel rebar manufacturers here within the valley, but unfortunately the local availability of metals exceeds local manufacturing demand. We went back to paper as well. Paper was of interest here, not least because we're talking here, there's a large amount of paper, not sufficient for the OCC collections, unfortunately, to justify an OCC plant. And the other issue you have with the City of Phoenix, truthfully, is that we obviously suffer in terms of water availability, and therefore to establish a water pulping or de-inking facility here wouldn't necessarily fit in with the environmental concerns and sustainability plans of the city. So looking at the possible local opportunities, We felt from the study that there were 3 key areas in which we could focus. Rather than taking a large proportion of our waste material to the landfill, we should be looking at plastics, glass, and metals. Paper was not as easy an option for us here, although I think there is possibly a multi-state approach that might be worth pursuing there. You'll also notice from our study that we haven't really looked at design. What we're suggesting here is a focus very much on the processing and shredding area. We're looking at people getting that feedstock ready rather than people who can actually use that feedstock here within Arizona. So from the economic impact perspective, again, we focused on Maricopa County. We considered 3 things. First, we looked at the expansion of existing glass-colored operation. Second, the expansion of existing metal shredding here within the valley. Most importantly, though, we looked at the establishment of a new PET post-consumer flake or pellet firm. The study time horizon again being 2017 to 2022. If we're able to establish those 3 things here within the valley, we believe that we would have a cumulative gross state product contribution of around $123 million over those 5.5 years. The jobs per year that would be created would vary from around 118 in 1 year, the minimum, to a maximum of 207 jobs. We believe that across the 5.5 years, those jobs would account for around 61.3 million in labor income. So the numbers are small, but bear in mind this is purely for the establishment of 1 new facility and expanding operations of 2 existing facilities here within the city. You can see here the breakdown between the 3. If we wanted to establish a PET flake or pellet processor here within the city of Phoenix or Maricopa County, we're looking at capital expenditure of around 10 to 12 million. But we'll be looking at around 50 direct jobs being created, but 110 to 188 per year when you take into account the indirect and induced effects. For glass and metal shredding, the impacts are far lower. We're looking at around an additional 5 new jobs in glass colored. I believe they employ currently around 12 people at Strategic Materials. And for metal shredding, there would be no additional jobs created or additional contribution to gross state product. The only way you could really find a profitable business case for that would be if you could find new manufacturers within the valley who would be interested in taking that additional metal, because the cost of actually transporting shredded metal out of the state is quite prohibitive. We think, though, whilst we very much focused on the processing and shredding side, that you shouldn't be looking at that in isolation from actually encouraging manufacturers here within the city of Phoenix or Maricopa County to actually use the the recycled material rather than prime material. I think it's imperative that these 2 activities actually take place hand in hand, and I know that the city is keen to do that rather than focus purely on 1 stage at a time.
To Brandy and Ant for providing that information. And I have some questions here that I thought we might be able to dig into a little bit. And the first one really is for you, Brandy. And the question is, why did the city of Phoenix think that there was even value in the waste to begin with?
That's a really good question. So when we embarked on this journey, we needed, in order to divert more waste from the landfill, we needed to know what's in the waste stream, what's in the recycling stream. And so that's why the city commissioned the waste characterization study, and it was a route level, back of the truck, large scale study. And what we really did with that data, it made us basically really smart about what's in our trash. And we decided to then go out to the market and say, hey, market, we have all of these resources. what would that look like? Can you use them? Can you make a new product? How much would you need? What would the conditions need to be in order to attract you, say, to our resource innovation campus to set up shop and remanufacture these into something new and stimulate the local economy? And so what we did is we used a very sexied up version of a procurement technique called the request for information, but we called it a call for innovators. And we put it out and we received feedback from all over the globe, more than 100+ responses about all of these different opportunities. And so we really leveraged that data to help us respond with a series of very targeted procurement opportunities, requests for proposals to help us. So we knew there was value because we looked to see what we have and we asked.
Very interesting, yes, and it was quite a buzz when that call for innovators went out, and yes, it was from all over the globe, so it was very interesting to see what came of that. And then one more follow-up question to that. So Phoenix is obviously very committed to creating a circular economy. Why did you think, you being City of Phoenix, why was it important to do this economic impact assessment?
That's a great question. I think for all of us, we knew there were economic opportunities. And even though the results show that they're modest, they're important, I think, nonetheless. And you showed the slide with different diversion rates. I believe California and Austin, New York were some of the examples you cited. Every jurisdiction has kind of a different operating context. So they're looking at diversion in different ways, and they're also operating within different regulatory structures. And for us here, located where we're at, we knew that in order to advance our goals, we were going to really have to make an economic case. And it really, in my mind, I see it as an extension of the waste study. So we got smart, but now we're going to get really precise about how we can do that. And to do that, we had to identify what are those opportunities, how much would it take? And I think some of the most exciting outcomes from especially the second study is, we know with just the City of Phoenix feedstock, there's an opportunity for the PET flake, right? So, but what if we thought larger? What if we worked on a more regional, collaborative basis? And then, what if we were able to partner with the private sector? So we talked about how the study is very focused on single-family residential, and that's really by necessity because that's who we as a city service, and that's the waste stream that we have control over. But there are so many additional opportunities to expand that I think this study kind of helps open our eyes to.
I think I've heard that what the City of Phoenix collects represents about half, roughly, between the other multifamily housing that you mentioned and the commercial industry. So, we're looking at double. And then if we have all of the other cities that surround the City of Phoenix, that's about double again. So it seems like there might be some really fantastic opportunities to look at within this. So Ant, we worked on this together, and I want to just talk a little bit about the data.
Yes.
So the data. My question for the viewers is, what were the data sets that you were looking at, and were there any gaps that were problematic in terms of running the model?
I think we were fortunate from the outset that we had the waste characterization study data. That is something that not every city has, or not every city makes public to allow people to use. So the fact that we had that certainly gave us a good start.
Could you have run the model without the waste characterization?
We could run the second model hypothetically, so we could tell you that if you established a PET processor here, it could generate X. But what we couldn't tell you without the data was whether we had sufficient feedstock here within the city or within the valley to enable us to establish that PET processor. I think the key thing for me really is diversion is great. It's good to actually ensure that our waste is not heading towards landfill, but simply passing it on to a strategic materials or to a PET say re-community or something of that nature, is insufficient, because what we found during the studies that the people that we pass it on to end up shipping it halfway around the US or halfway around the world. So any carbon footprint reductions or any other savings, quite frankly, not happening purely from diversion. What we need to do here is to actually establish not only a diversion, but a way in which we can utilize that material here locally. That will have a far bigger impact, not only on the local economy, but also on the environment.
Mm-hmm. I think if I might piggyback on that, I think that's one of the neatest things too about the newly launched incubator, because really with that focus on resolving challenges and creating technologies, it is really focused on that local piece and finding ways to use those items here at home.
That's exactly what we need to do.
In addition, I wanted to mention that the City of Phoenix also funds a position within your Economic Development Department. And that has been really critical for you guys to work together and kind of break down those silos and come together as one unit of the City of Phoenix. So how could this report be used with the partnership in your Economic Development Department strategically?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I think that that's a really good point too about how we work in the city. We're a very large organization, but it's, for us, we do a lot of divisional, cross-department, cross-discipline type of work. And I think moving in these directions and pushing for improved diversion and creating circular economy, you have to. The municipal governments are very unique in that they provide such a broad range of service. I don't think any private business in their right mind would operate so many disparate services, right. But we have the privilege of doing that. But that's a great point and a great question. Our partnership with community and economic development, this study goes hand in hand, and basically what the first thing that once we're moving forward, it's deploying that information to the experts in economic development and asking them, okay, we're looking to develop this market, and what are your recommendations? Again, really allowing them to shine in their area of expertise.
Smart. So it enables the City of Phoenix to be more strategic in how they move forward with circular economy implementation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Based on what you're collecting yourselves, and you mentioned partnerships and regional approaches to this, and would there be opportunities to partner from a feedstock perspective potentially with these types of activities?
I think there has to be partnerships long term. We consider paper, for example. Like I said, that given the water situation here within the valley, it's very difficult for us to justify establishing a water pulping or de-inking facility for paper. There is the existence of those types of operations within Nevada. Now, obviously, their water, I'd have thought, is still quite challenging, but perhaps not quite as challenging as Phoenix. Right. So, why are we not engaging in conversations with people in Nevada, enabling them to utilize our paper rather than seeing it shipped across halfway around the world, and then they can perhaps send something back down to us, such as glass or something of that nature, to enable some activity to work across state boundaries. I think definitely within the state that there is potential for partnerships. Bear in mind, we've only looked at the waste characterization and the diversion rates for the City of Phoenix. Right. The boundaries between Metro Phoenix, the City of Phoenix, Tempe, Mesa, Glendale, Gilbert, Chandler, they all merge into one. We should definitely be working together in that area, and then perhaps looking further afield within the state. My only word of caution would be that both the studies that we've undertaken so far are gross. As we said, the way in which the NAICS codes are defined for the first study will ensure that we have some non-recyclers included within those numbers. And on the second one, we've only really looked at the positive aspects. We said, okay, there's enough feedstock here, and if we establish a processor to handle that PET, we could employ this many people and have this positive impact upon the economy. We haven't thought of the potential negatives as well, and there would be some. There's bound to be some. There may be people working within traditional plastic resins, and they you know, may actually lose their jobs as a result of having a PET processor here instead. So we'd have to look at things more in the round, but I think it is quite clear that regional partnerships are the way to go. Definitely intrastate partnerships are the way to go. And I think that there is potential here.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important things about doing this study is you don't even have a basis to engage in those conversations without something like this, right? So this really just helps, even though they are gross numbers, it does give an idea and a starting point to have those conversations. And then to see, you know, will the market support it? You know, what are all those other factors that would need to fall in line, and how do we try to bridge the gaps that may exist?
The gross model is nothing new. When the Arizona Commerce Authority looks to bring a new company here and considering some incentives, it doesn't consider the impact on the other businesses necessarily. It will look at what would be the impact of incentivizing business X to relocate within the city of Phoenix. It's exactly what we've done with the PET processor and expanding the glass colored and metal shredding operations here.
Yeah, it does seem like it gives economic development department a lot to chew on and really sort through and see, you know, where they want to take their first next steps based on that. So we're actually really excited to release this report and share it with everyone. And on the job loss, I think it's a fascinating discussion because, I mean, if there's one thing in life that's consistent is change, and you know, we have to adapt. This is the way the world is moving to. But I do believe that Risen works in a way where we do our best to be inclusive and bring people to the table to apprise them of, you know, next steps and maybe some that businesses that could potentially be displaced or impacted in any way, that they're included in it so that they're at least apprised of the information early on. So
I think that's one of the distinguishing factors of the work that you all do in terms of your executive education on creating circular economy and really pulling in that ethical focus, if you will, the where are things going to be disruptive and how do we try to smooth that or create something else where there is now, you know, something that was disruptive.
Yeah, I mean that's the nature of all of this, is you're disrupting a linear economy and bending that line, you know, to bring the beginning and the end together again. And there's tensions all along that curve, and there's impact. So we try to be mindful of that. We do map it to the SDGs and the Ethical Circular Economy certification, which is a lot of fun and very hands-on. So thanks for that little plug on that.
I had a lot of fun doing it.
Good.
So.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun doing it.
You have to remember the workplace is constantly in a state of flux. You know, everyone's worried about automation at the moment.
AI.
You know, so I think this is just another area in which we have to consider. So nothing's going to stay the same forever.
No, thankfully. Yeah, change is good. Okay, so Ant, some questions on running the model itself, and I was curious if you might talk about some of the challenges that we ran into during that process.
I think, I mean, we had good data to begin with. I think our biggest concern probably was the lack of companies currently operating within Arizona that we could use for the operational and the CapEx and those types of costs. We were fortunate enough to be able to speak to people both, you know, on the east and west coast who were able to help guide us there. But it certainly was a challenge to deal with. Also, quite honestly, you know, I come from a business school. We're not specialists in recycling, and it's such a vast area, even within just a single area like paper or plastics, that it was quite challenging for our team to understand the differences. I think, you know, we were quite shocked by the fact that some manufacturers are able to move at random, depending on the pricing, between virgin and prime material, virgin and recycled materials. So that was quite a shock for us, to be honest. But I mean, I think our numbers are strong. I believe honestly that with the PET, the glass, and with the metals, those numbers are definitely robust. I'm a little less sure about the gross impact of the current recycling industry within the city of Phoenix, but that really is a reflection of government federal codes for industries rather than anything else. If a next code would exist for recycled plastics and recycled glass manufacturers, life would be a lot easier.
Well, and that's the challenge on being on the front end of this stuff is, you know, I'm sure there will be in 5 years, you know,
Exactly.
so we'll help pave the way for that a little bit. You were going to say something?
No, I think that was one of the most surprising things for me too, and in terms of the ability of the companies to switch from virgin materials to recycled materials, depending on the market price, and with very small modifications to the manufacturer. And I actually never had any idea what a next code was, but what you said is exactly on point. I mean, I think on the line and not too distant future, there will be some that are more applicable to the type of work that we're doing.
The NAICS constantly evolve every 4 or 5 years, so I'd hope that in the next iteration we have some recycled manufacturers included.
That will be great.
It would be.
That means there's progress, right?
Exactly.
And it'll make your life a little bit
lot
easier.
easier.
Exactly. Yes, I remember all those phone calls. And who else can we talk to grab some of the data that's, you know, real life data? So those were some, you know, creative solutions to be able to solve for some of the data gaps that we had here. And I think it was interesting that there are data gaps here. So even to notice that the businesses don't yet exist here in the state of Arizona, there's an opportunity in itself. So we're learning so much as we go through this. It's an exciting time. So another question, perhaps to the both of you, what key findings were the most interesting to you and why?
I think the fact that we are still not doing an awful lot with plastics surprised me. Everyone, I think generally, I think everybody is aware from a layman's perspective of PET and HDPE. There are 5 other types of plastic. We do very, very little with those. I know there are some innovations taking place in terms of building blocks in New Zealand or Australia. There's NBA polymers are trying to extract things from plastics generally rather than focusing just on PET or HDPE. So that's interesting. But I must admit, you know, as a layman, I wasn't aware. I thought plastic was plastic, and I put it in my blue recycling bin. Little did I realize that a lot of that just never gets used.
You know, that's a good question about what's the most interesting. There are so many points to kind of to come through. You know, for me, so we've done 2 economic impact studies, and I think what I keep coming back to is there's so much more that we can learn and do and study, and there's so much more opportunity to kind of refine and hone in. And it seems like I mean, I guess this is how it is, right? The more you know you don't know.
Yeah.
But it's good because it opens up those opportunities for those partnerships, for those conversations, and really looking at possibilities.
Well, you must have like secretly read because you teed up my next question perfectly.
Nice.
Thank you for that. It was, what would you suggest to explore further at this point now? Because, you know, there is an incredible amount of information and data to morph into knowledge to be able to make decisions on that. And I think these were such interesting studies that, you know, where can we go with this, and what would your suggestions be with that? Maybe start with Anne.
We focused on the waste profiles of single-family residential homes. We need to look at what the waste profile is of waste generally within this area. We need to understand it, because that would tell us whether there is sufficient feedstock in some of these other areas. The other thing that I say I would like to look at would be ways in which we can utilize a lot of the material that appears to have no value at present within our system. I believe in San Francisco that there's a bag that's being trialed at different homes, enabling people to put their material they think is not recyclable within it, and we're
Right.
seeing if we can extract value from it. It's an experimental trial there, but what we're really looking at, I think, is that type of activity. We need to look at how we can extract more value out of some materials. People always say, oh yeah, it's great, HDPE, PET. They think about recycled paper. They may even think about recycled metals. They're not thinking that when they put their straws, when they're using their different food containers, the little silver foil type plastic containers, they're thinking of their chip wrappers and their candy bar wrappers and things of that nature. What can we do with those?
That's right.
Well, and I think part of the challenge is that a lot of what's happening now with some of those items is it's waste of fuel or waste of energy. And I think on an interim basis, barring no better use of those items, perhaps that's an avenue. But what I'm really interested in is, and it's really how do we work as part of the whole system, right, from the beginning when those products are manufactured to the end, to make them produce in such a way that they can be handled by our material recovery facilities and not fall through the cracks, so to speak.
Well, bear in mind, again, these studies are purely looking at a linear economy at the moment. We're not really looking at redesigning the economy and the impacts there. We're just looking at the way the economy is currently structured and what it could be from a business perspective there at present. So I think, you're right. We need to consider as well what the impact will be if we try to redesign the economy.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's plenty of other DIF sessions that are focusing on the design, and we're focusing on the back end of that, which is typically our focus here. But we learned so much when we held a packaging workshop, and we had Chuck, who was dealing with all of the waste on the back end in the same room, and they learned, oh, we're designing this specific packaging to be compostable, but Chuck is in the back of the room saying, nope, it goes to the landfill, and here's why. So there's definitely an opportunity to come together and learn about these things for the redesign on the front end.
Yeah, I think the gap there between the front end and the back end, I mean, we need to close the loop on that. I mean, I think the more conversations that we can have on that design front with our real life realities and challenges that we face when we try to divert and reuse and repurpose these things, the more that those can be taken into consideration on the front side, the better we'll all be progressing.
Yes, it'll make everyone's lives easier in the end. Okay, so just a quick question about other cities, and if they were interested in doing an economic impact assessment, do you have any suggestions for them if they're watching this?
Partner with their local college or university is the obvious way forward, I think, to be honest. They will need to have some form of waste categorization study.
Have that first?
I would suggest that would be an important first step, but then look at partnering with the local college or university to try and investigate this further and include business school rather than sustainability type departments. So I think it gives it more kudos.
And if they don't have access to that in their area, is this something that Seedman could help with in another area?
We can. We implement economic impact studies throughout the US, so there's certainly no issue on a state, on a county, even the code level if we have to.
Well, and I would echo that. I think partnering up with your local university, I think it's been a game changer for us at the City of Phoenix. And yes, we're fortunate to have visionary leaders who made great decisions about getting smart about the waste. But really, I see our partnership with Arizona State University and the creation of RISN, it's really an outcome multiplier. So our organizations together can do so much more than we could on our own. 1 + 1 = 3 type of concept. Yeah. Yeah, it's been a really great partnership, and working with both of you has been just really fantastic. Actually, it's been fun and inspiring, and we learn all the time, and it's really such a true honor. And with that, I just want to thank you so much for being here, and thank you to all the DIF attendees. This concludes our discussion. If you have any questions at all regarding this research or any additional work that we're doing here at ASU in partnership with the City of Phoenix, please feel free to contact
me at mara.DeFilippis. It's spelled there on the screen for all of you, at asu.edu. And we encourage you to visit our website at resourceinnovation.asu.edu. We hope you continue to enjoy the DIF through the remainder of the festival, which runs through November 24th. Stay tuned to think.dif.co, and thank you and have a great day.